Our upcoming orator is a seasoned DevOps engineer and systems administrator at GitLab who's passionate about customer experience. He has a proven track record in building, deploying, and supporting infrastructure using DevOps practices over multi cloud platforms. Outside of work, he loves hiking and working over DIY projects using Raspberry Pi and Arduino. Through his workshop, we shall get to know how the most effective application development teams leverage GitLab to automate their DevOps process and achieve business outcome. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of victory wave for the very dynamic Mr. Rohan Shah.
Hi, welcome all. I'm Rohan from GitLab, and as a today's presenter, I'll be covering automating your software factory as a workshop with GitLab specifically. So about me as a background, I'm a seasoned DevOps engineer and a system administrator working with GitLab at the moment as a technical manager. So let me cover through the agenda topics that we'll be covering today in today's session as a workshop. So I'll just give some background as an introduction to GitLab, which is already covered by Soumya, who is our presenter who just spoke some time back. At the same time, we'll be covering to the parts of software factory where GitLab can be used as a project management tool, portfolio management tool, and then how developers can benefit out of GitLab. Later on, going forward, how we can automate the software factory is what we'll be covering in Auto DevSecOps. And then going forward, we'll also be covering some areas of how security can be embedded and how GitLab takes care of it. And see to believe it is what our motto is for this workshop. So as a part of your automating your software factory, these are some of the major components that I'd like to cover. One is the major component is project and program management. Then we talked about the SCM part, which developer takes care of it, takes care of the building part, packaging the whole software. And then going forward, we have more of people who are doing QA, documentation, acceptance testing, and then comes the part of the delivery, which the operations takes care of. So this is how the traditional software factory looks like. Now, what if I can say that GitLab can automate all of this? And we'll be discussing the same in the upcoming slides. So we'll start with a small story here. I love motorbikes, racing, even F1 as well. So you always know that in motorbike racing or in F1, if you see the difference between the cars, it's almost negligible. The engines and the power ratio and everything is like the same. But the difference that matters here is the driver of milliseconds who is making the losing and the winning thing going forward. Similarly, we want to kind of reduce our cycle time compression in the software factory. And this is where GitLab plays a major role, because this is how the current industry looks like when it comes to DevSecOps or DevOps, or name it your software development platform. You have multiple tool set trying to collaborate with each other and basically making a bundle and jungle out of it, and basically increasing your complexity and lack of transparency. So take an example here. If one of the tool is being used by project managers and the second tool is being used by developer, unless the developer informs the project manager about the change, the project manager has no clue about it. And going forward, when the operations makes a small change in the architecture, whether the developer is aware of it, no clue, because due to lack of collaboration and transparency. And this is happening because of multiple tool set that the industry is currently using, basically slowing your DevOps initiative end of the day. What is the GitLab advantage here is that it's a single tool set for a complete SDLC lifecycle. And we are collaborating with multiple teams here. It's not just for project management, but also developers, security, operations, infrastructure. And how we are going to do this is something that we are trying to cover this in the workshop. How do you automate your software factory? So this is how a normal DevOps or DevSecOps lifecycle looks like. And what GitLab promises is a 200% faster DevOps lifecycle. And don't believe us. By the end of the slide, I'm sure that you'll see it what you believe it going forward. So the important factors that we'll be covering here is how we're going to kind of manage, plan, create, verify, and package your software. And then going forward, how we are going to release, configure, and monitor into the environment. And this is what we'll be covering. Along with this, we're also covering the secure stage, which is the major part of DevSecOps. And this is where we say that, okay, it's not just about sequential DevOps, where you're just kind of putting things in deployment, but instead you are looking at concurrent DevSecOps with a 200% faster DevSecOps lifecycle, which can be achieved with GitLab. So what GitLab offers you is a way to replace this multiple tool set by having a single tool chain and making sure that it's easily manageable going forward. Now, we are not looking at rip and replace technology, but we are looking at coexisting. So GitLab, being an open source tool, is able to collaborate or kind of integrate with most of the tool set that you're seeing here and can be used. So in case you're already using some tool set and you won't like to replace it with GitLab, we can coexist. And you can confirm this in the below link that we have shared. If you click on any of those icons, we can see the comparison of how GitLab positions itself with these tool sets. So what we achieve at the end of the day by having a single tool chain is a better way to streamline your DevOps adoption journey, where we are covering your portfolio management, project management. You are already covering SCM CI in terms of your GitLab was already a kind of a game changer for that. And then we're also covering security and the CD part of it. Basically increasing the value of GitLab adoption increases your DevOps journey and makes it adoption much faster. So that is what GitLab has to offer. So going forward, let's take the next step, how GitLab can be used as a PM tool or project management or portfolio management tool. But what you get as a benefit is 200% faster life cycle is what we are trying to cover here in this workshop. So as a part of this workshop, we're going to cover some major areas, which I'll be showing the next slides. So as a part of your DevOps journey, the important factor is the manage and plan stage, which you're covering the project management or portfolio management tool, which is the part of your DevOps journey. So going to portfolio management, what GitLab offers is a way to organize your agile planning structure. This is what you can achieve in GitLab with groups, subgroups, project. Each group can be tracked with epic, issues, sub-epics, and issue and milestones. And the complete thing can be visualized easily with roadmap. So that is what we'll be showing you inside today's workshop. And as a part of portfolio management, what we'll be covering is how we can kind of have this visibility with roadmaps. What is the developer doing? What is the task status of all? How you can plan your milestones and so on is something that we'll be covering in today's workshop. And going forward, we'll also look into burn down charts, how a developer can and a team manager can track the progress of the project and also look at the burn down and burn up charts going forward. So as a part of project management, which the team lead takes care of. The previous part of was possibly taken by project manager, but now when it comes to team lead, it all starts with repository projects where we take care of the issues, discussion, collaboration in GitLab, which GitLab can offer. And all of this links to the primary group organization where you are kind of taking care of the epics milestone on the project manager portfolio management level. So going forward, what GitLab offers you is a better way to kind of just manage your issues and sprints. We have an issue tracker where you can track your issues. You can set up milestones, have time tracking, set up due days, manage labels for your issues that the developer takes care of going forward. But at the same time, we have a better kind of sprint or kind of Kanban issue boards where you can manage your project status with the issue tracking and make sure that the issues can be tracked and assigned to the right person at the same time. And we can have multiple boards depending on your requirement, which we'll be covering in this today's workshop. So at the same time, documentation is one of the important part which we covered in the software factory. It's something that also GitLab can cover, and that is also part of it. So the same resources will be available to you going forward in a document or a PPT, which we'll be sharing post this call. Now, as a part of lab setup, there are some prerequisites that we'll like you to kind of cover as a part of this workshop. The first thing is that you can download our guide, which we discussed, that how to follow this lab is basically something that is linked to this URL. You can just search for gitlab.com/rmsrohan, and this guide should be available right away out of the box. The next step is registering yourself for a free GitLab trial account. For doing this lab exercise, you will need Ultimate tier, which is our primary offering. And once you have that, for today's free trial, we can do this lab exercise is what is the aim for this workshop. So once you have the free trial achieved, you should be able to log into gitlab.com. And the next step is create your own group. The group name can be anything like test group or something like that, whichever you're comfortable with. Fill in the details for your organization, and then we can take care of the next step, which is how we'll be starting with the workshop. So once this prerequisite is done, we'll start with the project management. So for this, we want you to go to the primary main group that is you have created, possibly test group. And then the next step starts with the lab assignment. The same lab assignment is available in our handout, which will be offered you in the link, that is gitlab.com/rms. Here we'll be covering how to create groups, how to create epics, how to create labels, how to create workflows is something that we'll be covering in this today's workshop. So let me just give you a background of what we'll be achieving at the end of the workshop. Is basically you'll be able to kind of create projects, create epics, create milestones for organization. And this is how you'll be starting with the software factory development, like assigning and planning and managing your projects first. And then the next step will be deploying these projects as a software factory. So as a part of the first step, what we expect you is to create a small group, subgroup in your project, which we call as cyber operations. Whatever details needs to be filled in inside these boxes is mentioned on the left hand side of your screen. And make sure that the visibility is private, just to make sure only you have access to the project. Now, why are we doing this is so that we can define the structure which we discussed earlier, that we have the cyber operations as a primary group, and then we'll be creating some more subgroups inside our projects. So the next thing is that we create a subgroup inside cyber operations. So there's a new subgroup option on the top. What you need to do is just in new subgroups, add the group name as joint force, leave default, and go ahead with the same. So similarly, we are going to create some more subgroups. I'll be skipping this slide because you'll be having this workshop handout going forward. So we can do the same. We are creating more subgroups accordingly. Now it's time to create an epic. Now, epic is a better way to kind of manage your strategic initiatives for organizations. Basically, in case you have a plan that, okay, your security team wants to kind of deploy a firewall, so that can be a strategic initiative. Now, how to deploy a firewall, how to take care of it, what are the backdrops, what testing you will do is part of your milestones possibly, or you can have more sub epics accordingly. So this is what you can create in GitLab. So to create sub epic, you need to go into the epic option on the GitLab window, and let me show you that by coming out of my screen and sharing the next window. So once you have a group created, in this case, I've created a group called Agile PPM. This is the subgroup that I created, cyber operations. Inside those subgroup, I have multiple subgroups as shown in the previous slide. Now, once you have this subgroups created, the next step is to create epic. You can list the epic that I already created, or you can create a new epic there using the new epic option. And as shown in the slide deck, you need to fill in all the details, the new epic name. Make sure that the naming conventions are maintained so that you have a right view that is required for our organization, and then create epic. Make sure you add the start date and end date correctly so that you can have a better visualization of the epic going forward. So similarly, we are going to kind of have more epics, and I have more description inside GitLab. So what this basically achieves is, once we have all these epics created, the next step is to visualize these epics. So we go back to our epic window inside our primary group, that is cyber operations. If you click on the epic on the left hand side and click on roadmap, what you should be able to see is a kind of a better view of managing your project. So this is your primary epic. You have more sub epics there, and you can have multiple sub epics there as well. Each of the sub epic might have possible X number of tasks assigned to it, and those tasks can be viewed from boards, which will be kind of covering going forward. So this is what an organization structure looks like, which we promised some time back. So once you have the structure created using our lab exercise, you will be able to have a better view of the task those have been assigned to the developers going forward, as we showed you in the roadmap. And then as a lab exercise, we want you to kind of create more of this epics and have a visualization tested from your end, is what the expectation is from today's workshop. So from this handout, we expect everybody to create a trial license and then try out this workshop so that you will be able to kind of look and feel how the kind of project management and portfolio management looks like in GitLab. And why are we doing this is something that we'll be covering the next part. You have your project managers, you have your team leads who kind of created a project for you, a portfolio for you. And the next step is managing those projects. where you are kind of creating milestones which are created by team leads or developers. So coming to the organizational structure, you have the top level who creates the epics, the kind of organizational level epics. Then you have subgroups, which is basically your operations group, your development group, your QA group, and so on, and other teams who kind of creates their own group and manages their projects going forward. So similarly, we create subgroups for lab. And then the next step is same structure that I showed you earlier. We create more details and we create projects accordingly. Now, basically, project is basically where you store your files and data, specifically your repository in GitLab term or Git term. Now, once you have created a project, the next step is creating milestones for your team. So let's take an example. If you're having a release tomorrow, then you create a label name 5.1, possibly with a milestone. Set up the start date and end date, where by what time you want to kind of deploy your software release or version, and set up the labels accordingly for other labels as well, 5.2 and 5.3 milestones. Let me show an example how the milestone UI looks like. So I'll go back to my primary screen. Inside issues, there are milestones. Currently, I'm inside my primary group. I might go into my second basically a project if I want to. And inside those, I will create epics or issues. Okay, so I will have my projects, as in this case, sample project. I will have the list of issues that I already created. If I want to create a new issue, I just create a new issue first. And according to this, I can fill in the title, test project change. I can fill in the description, assign it to myself, as in I'm supposed to work on this project, have a milestone assigned, which can be created, which I'll be showing the next slide, and have a due date that by what time I'll be kind of creating this task. Once the tasks are created, we can define the milestones, which I showed you earlier. The new milestone can be created using new milestone option. You set up the title that says, okay, release 5.1 possibly, the start date and the end date possibly, when you want to release, and some description which you want to kind of define. So once you define a milestone, you can have burn down charts required for your project accordingly by the issues that you have created. So this is what milestones looks like going forward. And depending on the milestone, you can also have scope labels, basically to define your workflow. Let me show this in a bigger window first. Okay, so what is the reason for scope labels is that in case you have defined a workflow that you want the task to go from to do to done or close state, that is where you define workflows, and this can be achieved with scope labels from milestone perspective. And once you have this complete structure created, what you get as an end result is basically you are able to better manage those tasks. Let me show an example here. So once you have gone to a project and click on boards here, this is how the basic board looks like. You have a number of open and closed tasks. In case you like to create a new board, there's an option to create new board here. If I want to kind of find out the task assigned to me as of now, I can have a new scope defined that is assigning. In case I want to kind of filter out tasks, I can say, okay, filter out task by backlog, and we can filter out those backlogs. If I want to delete this and change this, I can do the same. So this is how we can kind of easily manage boards inside our project. Now, if I look back to the primary project, and if I see boards here, let me show you some example boards that I've created. Like I'm trying to deploy task on version 1, version 2, version 6. So, okay, this task is supposed to be going to version 6.5, 6.6, so on. If I want to kind of do sprint planning, I can do the same with this kind of boards, where one task is changing from planning stage to doing stage and so on. And have more boards defined here as well. That is, let's take an example. If you're looking at triaging your accounts, that's depending on the priority, you can have more beautiful boards defined inside GitLab. So this is part of project management, which the developer is responsible for, or the project team leader is responsible for assigning their team members. So we discussed about how you are able to use boards, and you can use the same for milestones as well. It's something that you will cover in this workshop as a part of the handout. Now, these are some of the examples that I covered some time back. You have the sprint board where you're able to kind of manage your sprints. You're able to kind of have Scrum and Kanban boards as information radiators. And then we can have complete visualization of your complete structure using the roadmap option of GitLab. So all in all, going from the top level of the organization to the bottom developers and QA team is something that everybody can kind of contribute in a single tool without need to go to other tool set and same. But the reason why I'm saying this is because in the next slide or the next lab, what we'll be covering is the developer part of it, that this is all project management. And when it comes to developers, what developer gets is a better way to collaborate with GitLab using Epic milestone sprint planning. And we'll be covering GitLab basics of developers going forward. So the next step of your DevSecOps lifecycle is once the management planning is completed for organization, is the task assigned to developers where they kind of create the code, verify the code, package the code end of the day. And this is where how GitLab takes care of it, something that we'll be covering in the next slide. So as a developer, what you're doing here is once you have a new branch created, normally in a Git operation, all of this task is something that has to be done manually as of now, or has to be integrated with some other tool set. What GitLab offers you is a kind of a single tool to cover this complete lifecycle and also automate this lifecycle. It's something that we'll be covering because we have DevSecOps practice built in GitLab out of the box without integrating or installing third-party tools. So where does the developer start normally? Once you have your projects defined, once you have a portfolio defined for your organization, you can have the task defined for the developers that, okay, what task you need to do as a project manager or team lead. The developer will normally take one of the tasks which are assigned to him. They can filter the task based on the developer name as well. So depending on the task which they are working on, let me show you a live example on how it looks like. So once you have, let's take an example, you have the boards here. Take one of the development board or a sprint board. Okay, this is a task that I want the developer to work on. Let me click on that. Okay, so this is a task that I said that, okay, developer has to work on this change. Now, what next? What does the developer do normally is they will create a merge request in GitLab. That's the GitLab workflow. As soon as they create a GitLab merge request, what happens here is GitLab will automatically create a branch for you to work on as a kind of a version of code as a part of SCM. That is what we normally refer to. So you have a separate set of code that the developer is able to kind of access through using the merge request. All the branches can be filtered from here, but a singular way is something that you can figure out from the merge request, which is developer assigned to. So you have once the branch is created, you can open our web ID. Now in normal cases, team members normally kind of does Git operation by downloading the piece of code on their desktop machine using IntelliJ or possibly Visual Studio Code or Sublime, anything. In our case, you can do the same using GitLab clone URL, something like that. But in case you like to edit it online using our version related software or web ID software, which is something similar to Sublime as well, where you're able to autofill your data as well, you can kind of make a change. So I'm making a small change inside the branch that was created, and then I'm committing to the branch by clicking the commit button. So this is all happening from UI, which you could have done from Sublime as well. So once the change has been done, inside the merge request, again, you're able to kind of see that, okay, the change has been done, but it's still in draft mode. I can mark it as ready. And since I've not defined any approvers here, there is no approval required. But in case I want to kind of log this file or log this repository or log changes to master, I can do that with GitLab easily. I will not be covering that part in this particular workshop because there's something out of the box that GitLab offers. But once this changes are done, you can merge your branch and can track the changes that has been done, what changes were done, what many commits are done, everything from GitLab. So this is a singular UI which the developer has access to, making it easy for them to collaborate. And you can track all of this via this particular dashboard and say, okay, this merge request, this is where it was related to, this for the changes done, and so on. This was the issue that is responsible for the change, and so on. So this merge request will close issue number 1 in our case. So once this issue is done, we can, as you can see, like the merge is completed, the issue got closed automatically. In normal scenario, if you are using some other tools, you might have to go to that issue, ask the project manager or developer has to go log into the software, close the issue manually, and so on. In our case, we made a change in the developer made a change, and the related merge request and issue got closed automatically. And you can track out that, okay, this was the merge done by the developer, what changes were done by which developer, which release will it come to. So a singular dashboard to kind of track your complete development cycle. Is basically we are trying to kind of looking at the software factory, which from the first slide that we covered, you made a project management change, you made a software configuration change. So the next step is building the change as part of your software factory. So going back to my lab exercise, we covered project management, we covered the developer scenario, and this is where we start with merge request. So same thing I showed you, that whenever there's a small change, it will automatically marked as draft so that there is no accidental merge done by the developer. Once the request is raised, you can see the status of that in the merge request. Whatever changes have been done can be easily tracked via web ID or via GitLab commands locally using any of the tool set that you use for Git. Now the next step is traceability. Once all of these changes are done, you're able to trace all of this from a single merge request. If the CI/CD pipeline has been triggered, if there is an approval process, or in case you like to kind of do security scan, cold quality scan, which we'll be covering in the next lab going forward. So till now, we kind of reached that merge request. The next step will be kind of tracking all of these changes of your organization in the automation level. In terms of code review, whenever there's a small change, in case a second developer has an issue or is not comfortable merging, or the team lead has an issue, they can easily collaborate with code reviews where they can mark the code accordingly. So all of this can be done from UI, and they can collaborate easily on using the web UI automatically. So we talked about reviewers, that okay, whenever there's a merge request, you can block the merge from happening, and we can assign reviewers accordingly in GitLab. An easy way to merge, like you just click on the button and merge can happen. If that's not the case, you might have to kind of do the merge in Sublime and so on, but you can easily track this from GitLab. Basically, the team lead doesn't have to kind of download that piece of code onto the desktop, then see the changes and kind of merge it. Instead, you can just click on the web UI and get the things done. Now, the next step is the CI/CD pipeline, which is like the major focus of the next step, automating your software factory. So we'll be covering those in the next lab. So what we'll be doing here is we'll create a merge request, which I showed you some time back. We kind of committed to the merge request, which I covered you in the lab exercise as well. Create a merge request, make the changes, make the file, small changes in README file, which I just showed you. This is something that the lab exercise that will be handed out to you later on. We had a merge request. We tracked the issue that was closed after the merge request. Then the next step is automating the deployment, like making the software changes is one part of it, but making sure that the software actually works, whether there is performance testing and so on done, whether the security scans and everything done by the right team developer is something that we'll be covering. But what you get as a developer is better code reviews, better collaboration, better developer experience and productivity with GitLab. And the next step is securing, releasing, configuring, monitoring your application. So we covered the manage and plan stage as part of portfolio management. We covered create, verify as part of your source code management, packaging, and so on. Now comes the next part of DevOps lifecycle, is securing, releasing, and configuring, and how we can automate those with GitLab as well. So shifting left is a key approach that we prefer, which we covered in the previous slide as well. That okay, developer has to kind of automate all of these stages. And for that to happen, he might have to integrate with multiple tool set, making a complex tool chain. But with GitLab, you can just simplify this, and this is something that we'll be covering. And where we come into the picture, we call it auto DevOps. What we mean by auto DevOps is that a way to automate all of your stages. That is, we worked on merge and build going forward, like you had a merge done. Now the next step is testing your code quality, which GitLab can take care of. Going forward, you can also do security scanning for your code and also for your deployed application using dynamic application security testing. And going forward, we can also look into packaging your content with container registry and package registry. And then comes the part of deployment, infrastructure deployment, and then later on monitoring the infrastructure as well as the application is something that we can take care of with auto DevOps, where you automate your software factory from end to end. So as the first step, what auto DevOps is basically in background is a set of templates that are pre-built and bundled along with GitLab. So you don't need to kind of build your kind of CI/CD pipelines or stages in XYZ tool. Ask somebody as a DevOps or Jenkins engineer, XYZ engineer to kind of take care of your coding part and so on. Instead, you can just kind of use our pre-built templates with auto DevOps, and that is available for most of the languages, which will be covering and showing you an example here. And as a background, when you kind of use this template, the pipeline gets automatically built and let the automation work for you. So you just pass the piece of code, like maybe Node.js code or Java code, NPM code, and so on, and let GitLab take care of your building, testing, deployment, and everything. GitLab can take care of that easily, which will be part of the next lab exercise. So once you have the DevOps pipeline set up, it can be easily tracked from the merge request as well, where you're able to track the pipeline and the security scanning and everything that was done from the merge request itself, which is something that we'll be covering in the lab as well. And once the deployment is completed, you can track the environments which have been deployed. Let it be staging, production, or review stages, how many servers have been deployed, whether those are in running state, whether the application is in running state. We can also check the logs and everything. As an operation engineer, I can also redeploy the environment in case something has failed and so on. And can also view the environment from a singular dashboard where we call environment, so it's in the operations area. So now comes the operations and the deployment part, where your operations teams comes in picture. So in case the pipelines are failing, the developer can also check and fix the same, or the operations team can redeploy the pipeline if required. So all in all, what we offer you is a better way to kind of track your changes, deploy changes, but also monitor the deployments as well, using the operations dashboard, where the operations team can take care of, okay, how many deployments have been done by the developer, whether those are in kind of good state or bad state, whether there is any blockers there. And this can happen for multiple environment deployments, like let it be staging, let it be production. You can track from a single operations dashboard. Now, this is what I'll be showing you in today's lab, how we can achieve this. So the same thing is available in the lab exercise, what I'll be showing you in the next slide, or basically in the live demonstration. And that is the main focus of automating your software factory. As a prerequisite for this lab, something that we don't cover automatically, is that you need to enable auto DevOps. For this to be achieved, you need to integrate one of the Kubernetes cluster. If you don't have a Kubernetes cluster available handy with you, we can help you kind of deploy that using the GitLab environment dashboard, which I'll be covering in the next lab exercise. So let's start with the demonstration on how you're kind of auto deploying your environment. So for this, I'll go back to my primary dash screen, that is Agile PPM, where I created one of the cyber operations project. Inside this project, the next step is I'll create a new project. Till now, we already created basic projects, not a kind of advanced project. So this is where automating part comes in picture. You can use one of the templates that we have pre-populated. So let it be Ruby on Rails, Spring, Node.js, any one of the application type. Just take one of the examples that you're comfortable with. Click on use template. I'll name the project as Node.js project for myself, and I'll create a project here. Okay. So as soon as I created a project, the next step is integrating this with the Kubernetes cluster, basically where the application will be deployed. So as an example, what I've done here is I've already kind of connected a cluster. So if you go to the infrastructure option on GitLab, there is option for Kubernetes cluster here. Since I've already connected one of the cluster, it's being shown here. But in your case, you need to click on connect or integrate a new cluster with certificate. Now, in case you don't have a cluster, you can click on any one of the options, that is EKS or GK. If you have an existing cluster, you can read about documentation on how to integrate your existing cluster. This can be an on-premise cluster, your desktop cluster as well, or the Kubernetes mini cube is on laptop as well. That all options are available to connect. So in this case, what I've done is I have created a GK cluster, that is Google Cloud. In this case, it will ask you to kind of put a cluster name, environment as I have put a wildcard that's star. In case you want to kind of deploy specific environments like development or production, you can define that. Inside your Google Cloud environment, you will see the project type. You might already want to kind of create a project. If not, you can read the documentation here. select the zone that you want to kind of deploy in, possibly India or APAC zone, any one of them. In this case, I'm just using your central 1A. Number of nodes that needs to be deployed. Now, this is very important. When you're deploying Kubernetes cluster, you need to define number of nodes. In case this, I'm just defining 3. And I can take a basic machine type, depending on your use case. As a first-time user, people will get a $300 credit from GitLab. In case you like to utilize that, a $300 credit for approximately 3 to 6 months. You get an option here in case you're trying it for the first time. So click on all of this option and click on create a cluster. Once the cluster is deployed with GitLab, you should see the cluster inside your Google Cloud environment. Basically, depending on your type of region that you have, you might see multiple nodes and everything already pre-deployed with GitLab. Now, once the cluster is deployed, you're able to see this in GitLab. There's an option to set a base domain. You can set up a base domain or just leave it as is. In this case, the URL will change, but that's okay to use. Next is integrations, where you tick on enable Prometheus and Elastic Stack Search. We'll be discussing why we're using this going forward, but as of now, just tick these options. Once all of this basic prerequisite is done, which is what is defined here in the lab exercise, the next step is the project that we created. Go back to the same project. In this case, let me go back to the main project. Give me a second. Okay, so this is the project that I created some time back. Next step is go to settings, general. You should be able to see all of this. On the left hand side, there's CI/CD option. There's option to expand auto DevOps. Just tick this box that says default DevOps pipeline. Now, depending on your deployment strategy, you can have multiple strategies for deployments. In this case, we are using automatic deployment to staging and manual deployment to production. We'll discuss why we're doing this going forward. But as of now, you can tick this option and save change. Now our project is ready to be auto deployed. Basically, you had project management issues and everything inside list and boards. Some developer worked on a task, made a change to the code in previous cases, lab exercise. We made a small change to the code. Let's make a small change again one more time. Click on web ID. Okay, so I'll put a line that says DevOps Summit India 21 Auto DevOps live exercise, live demo. I made this change, but wait for a second. Here I made a change directly to the branch, or it's asking me to create a new branch. So stop there. Take a step back. Let's start with the basic workflow. Where was the issue? Every changes has to have a task first. So again, as per lab exercise 1 and 2, you create a new issue first, make a small change. This is something that is missed by most of the developers most of the time. They don't have any task assigned and they make the change directly. So this is what we'll not be doing in this particular exercise. We'll create the task first and block the workflow. The same can be added as a compliance part inside your GitLab by protecting the master branch or main branch. So once you have an issue defined, we create a merge request first. Once the merge request is there, you can make a small change inside the code. In this case, I'll again modify the README file. Okay, now it is giving me an option to commit to the branch that was created. Okay, so once this particular change is done, just like we did in the lab exercise previously, there is a small change that happened in background. It automatically triggered my CI/CD pipeline, as you can see here. The same branch that I worked upon, small change. It triggered when I made that, or when I committed the change, it triggered a small pipeline, as you can see here. What is happening here is this pipeline got automatically created without me writing a single line of code. No pipeline code, no configuration of stages, nothing at all. You can verify this by going to the files. There is no GitLab YML file, which is our kind of standard template file, or you can see a CI/CD pipeline file. There is no YML file available here, GitLab YML. Without that, automatically the pipeline was created without intervention of the developer. It detected that the project is Node.js type. It started building the packages automatically. It took an auto build image and will kind of build that package. Let me, while this pipeline is running, let me showcase the pipeline that was already completed some time back. So in the build stage, what happened in background is that we launched a small Docker. We kind of copied your data inside that Docker or the software or Node.js package inside your Docker. We launched that Docker. We made a build command of that setup, basically. And once the build was complete, we saved that as a package inside the package container registry. So the complete thing was packaged and it was containerized, basically. So you can see the container that was created automatically, the image file. Now this can be depending on how you do it. You can also have package registry built for npm and so on, which is something that's readily out of the box available. And you can also have infrastructure registry with Terraform and stuff like that as much as code. So all of these options are available inside repository. So we made a small change. We went to the pipeline. Now the next step is testing your code. So what happens is GitLab will automatically trigger your code quality checks, do container scanning, DST, SAST, static analysis, and so on. Also do secret detection, linting of your project, and so on. And the complete output can be seen from the single dashboard. So you have code quality reports from your project. You have license reports in case you are using GPL license, remedy license, which is not supposed to be used by our organization. The license is there. Then you have security reports, which says, okay, you had some kind of serverless vulnerability available, which is low priority, which was done by the dash scanner. Then you had some third-party plugins which are used, but those are not supposed to be used or obsolete at the moment. The version is obsolete. It's something that can easily track out. In case this task needs to be worked upon, you can automatically assign or create an issue from your, and it will give a solution for this task that, okay, guys, you need to kind of fix this particular issue and get it resolved. You can assign this to a developer or anybody who's working on it directly here. And this is how you kind of work with CI/CD pipeline with GitLab, with auto DevOps. Now, this is what happened automatically. Once the testing and everything is done, there is a review environment which gets launched with GitLab. Basically, it will be deploying a URL where when you click on this URL, you should be able to kind of, since the deployment is not complete, it won't show that right now, but a URL will be available where you can kind of review the environment which has been deployed. Now, the next step is once the review is complete, we'll be doing kind of dynamic application security testing on that application. And then we can also do process performance testing, basically how much fast your stuff is loading, depending on what kind of performance test you are running on. You can have a different type of load performance testing as well, achieve. And once the complete testing is done, if everything passes, it will stop the review environment. So if that all is completed, the next step that you get here is work on the merge request. So if every test is completed, in this case, the pipeline is still running, so we are not able to see this results here. But if the pipeline is completed, let me show an example of a merged pipeline. So if the pipeline is successful, as you can see here, if there's a green tick box that says, okay, you have completed all of the tests successfully. Okay, the output of the same can be shown here. That is, okay, the security scanning showed this many issues. The license compliance has some problems. Do you still want to merge? And okay, how much time does it took from in terms of performance deployment? It's something that you can trigger out from this pipeline. And you can also see the output of the same from the merge request itself. So a single view for developer to kind of see what has been done by him, if that is working, if potentially has issues, basically the shift left approach. In case this was not done, you might want to integrate some other tools or ask the security team to kind of run the scan. And unless they come up with a solution for the fix, it's hard to maintain. So the complexity increases. And that is why we say 200% faster DevOps lifecycle, because a developer is able to kind of easily track all of this and make changes and kind of review and collaborate easily. Let's take an example. I spent like around 1 hour doing this. I'll say, okay, spent 1 hour, and automatically time tracking says, okay, my 1 hour was spent for this. I can easily have a time tracking report going forward for this project. So this report will be available to project manager and the end organization that, okay, guys, this is the current status of your deployment. So this is what we also have been covered in the lab exercise. What has also been covered in lab exercise? You create a project, you create a merge request, you see the pipeline getting completed, you see the stages, let the automation work for you. And the next step is having a kind of a complete overview of what was been done. So as a part of overview, GitLab covers your SST, DST, first testing, basically your API testing. In case you're using APIs, we will put some random first commands on the API and see if it's able to take load, if there any vulnerabilities, and so on. It's out of the box that GitLab has to offer. Dependency scanning in case using some third-party plugins, secret detection to verify if there is no password or any kind of secrets embedded inside your code, license scanning, and then comes the important part of viewing all of this at a part of software factory, where you're able to monitor this kind of completely on organization level. This is where we talk about the developer dashboard, where the developer has access to it. But not only that, also the team lead has access to what output was the developer was getting. And then at the end of the day, we have a security dashboard on an organization level where it shows the vulnerability reports for an organization as well. So all in all, let me show a small example. If this is my primary project, and if I want to have my security compliance report seen for on an organization level, I can see, okay, these are the vulnerabilities that happened over time. 5 projects are in red state. What are kind of errors that were generated by the scanners? I can filter them out. I can dismiss them accordingly, and so on. So a kind of nice dashboard on our organization level to see what is happening and also maintain compliance and accordingly. So this is what we say, see it to believe it. Like, we did the complete software factory end to end using GitLab, and don't take it from me itself. We showed you an example, and the same has been used by all of these organizations worldwide. We have many customers across APAC, and we have been awarded accordingly from many of our kind of customers and from Gartner and so on, Forrester and so on, that, okay, we are the best leading in this kind of cases. So at the end-to-end software factory, we showed you how we can do it. We are doing project management in this workshop, how we are doing SCM, basically making changes to the code, how we automated the packaging, managing, testing completely. The one part we didn't cover was code documentation, wiki. You can easily figure that out, try it and test it out. And when it comes to user acceptance, we have a review stage, which we showed you that, okay, the environment was reviewed and was deployed to production environment. So an end-to-end software factory was covered in this particular workshop. So thank you for your time, and please sign up for the trial license to try this hand-on lab. And the link for the same is gitlab.com/rms1, which was shared earlier on this link, where you can download this exercise and try it out yourself. So yeah, thanks for your time. And in case any questions, please feel free to connect with us after this workshop.